The lemonade stand and the silent battle was a scorching afternoon in late June, the kind of heat that made the pavement shimmer like a mirage. People rushed by with sunglasses and iced coffee cups, heads down, avoiding the burn of the sun. But on a quiet suburban sidewalk, just outside an old gas station and a worn-out grocery store, stood a small wooden table with a hand-painted sign. The sign read, "Fresh lemonade, $1. Help save my dad." The words were shaky, written in a child's careful hand, and the sign was taped to a jar that had barely a few wrinkled dollar bills. Inside Dot behind the table stood a little girl with big brown eyes and messy braids. Her name was Emily, and she was only 10 years old. She wasn't smiling like most lemonade sellers do. She didn't shout or wave at cars or sing silly jingles to catch attention. She just stood there quietly, holding a paper cup of lemonade in her hand, hoping someone would stop, hoping someone would care. Emily's life had changed overnight. Her father, David, had collapsed while making breakfast one morning. She remembered it like it was still happening, his face going pale, the frying pan crashing to the floor, and her screams for help echoing through the kitchen walls. The diagnosis was cruel. A rare heart condition worsening by the day. He needed surgery, soon, and not just any surgery. One that cost over $180,000. Emily's mother had died when she was just a baby, and David had been her entire world ever since. Now he lay in a hospital bed, tubes and monitors beeping around him, and Emily felt like the walls were closing in. They had no savings. David had lost his job at a construction firm months ago after a back injury. There was no insurance, no family nearby, no help. Emily had overheard the doctors talking in hushed voices, saying things like weeks at most, and slim chances, without immediate surgery. She wasn't supposed to hear those things, but she did. And she understood more than any child should. Dot, so she did the only thing she could think of. She took the money from her piggy bank, bought a bag of lemons, a box of sugar, and a pack of plastic cups, and set up the stand on the corner of their street. It wasn't much, but it was something, and to her, something was better than doing nothing while her father slowly slipped away. People passed by. Some smiled. A few stopped and bought a cup. Others looked the other way. A man in a suit laughed and said, "You'll need more than lemonade to save someone's life." Emily said nothing. She just stared at the ground until he walked away. She didn't cry, not in front of anyone. But every night when she got home from the hospital, she would curl up on the floor beside her father's empty bed and cry until her small body couldn't hold it anymore. Days passed, then weeks. She made $50 one day. Only $3. The next, she stood in the rain. She stood in the heat. She stood there every single day because her father once told her that resilience wasn't about being strong all the time. It was about showing up, even when everything felt hopeless. One afternoon, as the sun beat down harder than ever before, Emily's body began to sway. She hadn't eaten much that day, saving what little they had for her dad. Her arms were sore from squeezing lemons, and her throat burned from the dry air. But she didn't stop. Not even when her vision began to blur. Not even when the cars blurred into streaks of color, until a voice broke through the haze. "Are you okay?" It was gentle, filled with genuine concern. The kind of voice that didn't come from strangers in a rush. Emily blinked. Standing in front of her was a tall man in a plain button-up shirt and simple jeans. He had kind eyes, the kind that made you feel safe without knowing why. He wasn't flashy or loud, but something about him felt important. She didn't recognize him. To her, he was just another adult. "I'm fine," she said quietly, trying to stay upright. "You don't look fine." He replied softly, "May I sit?" She nodded. He sat on the sidewalk beside her, even though it was hot and dusty. He looked at the sign. Read every word. Then he asked, "Tell me about your dad." Emily's voice shook. "He's the best. He makes the best pancakes. He always waits for me after school. He used to be really strong, but now he can't even talk. He needs surgery, but we don't have money. So I thought maybe people would help." There was silence, not awkward, but deep. Thoughtful. You're very brave, the man said. She looked at him and finally asked, "Why do you care?" The man smiled. "Because sometimes the world needs people who care. And because I was once in your shoes." Emily's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really?" He nodded. "My mom used to clean houses. I used to wait outside while she worked. We had very little. But she taught me to never give up. And that sometimes strangers change everything." They sat in silence for a while. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Emily didn't hear much. Just a few words. "Yes, here now. No cameras. It's urgent." When he hung up, he turned to her. "What's your name?" "Emily." "Emily," he said, "do you believe in miracles?" "I want to," she whispered. "Then hold on. I'll be back." And just like that, he stood up and walked away. Not fast, not slow, just calm and certain. Emily watched him go, confused, a little hopeful, but unsure if she'd ever see him again. 2 hours passed. She stayed at the stand. More people came. A woman gave her $20 in a hug. A teenager handed her his only $5 bill. Something had shifted. It felt like the wind was whispering secrets, like something big was coming. Then a sleek black car pulled up. Tinted windows. Emily stood up, unsure if she should be scared. The door opened, and the man returned. But this time there were others. With him, 3, maybe 4 people. One of them was holding a tablet. Another had a briefcase. They looked important. Like the kind of people who belonged in big offices and glass towers, not on dusty sidewalks next to lemonade stands. "Emily," and the man said, walking up to her, "I want to introduce myself. My name is Sundar. Sundar Pichai." She blinked. The name didn't mean much to her. She was too young to know the world of Silicon Valley, of tech giants and fortune lists. "I work with Google," he added gently. She nodded slowly, still not understanding. But she listened. "I've thought a lot about what you said, and I've never seen courage like yours in someone so young. You didn't beg, you didn't scream. You stood here in the heat, in the rain, for your father. That's love, and that kind of love deserves the world." He knelt down to her level. "I'd like to help. I want to pay for your father's surgery. All of it." Emily's world spun. Her knees buckled. The tears she had held back for weeks came rushing forward like a broken dam. You're joking." "I'm not," he whispered, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And it's not charity. It's a thank you. Because people like you remind people like me what really matters." She couldn't speak. She tried. But only sobs came out. But just as things felt like they were finally turning, one of the assistants leaned over and whispered something to Sundar. His face changed. His eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. He looked at Emily. "Which hospital is your dad in?" "Mercy General," she said, confused. He stood up fast. "We need to go. Now. What's happening?" She cried, panicking. He turned to her. "Serious now. Your dad's surgery might not be the only thing at risk." And with that, they rushed into the car together. Sirens wailing in the distance, and a race against time began. A race against silence as the car sped down the freeway. Emily sat in the back seat next to Sundar, clutching a crumpled napkin in her small hand. She had wiped her tears with it moments ago, and now it felt like the only thing grounding her in a world that had suddenly started spinning too fast. The city blurred past the windows rows of gas stations, streetlights flickering. In the heat and the fading sun casting long shadows across the roads. But all Emily could think about was her father, and the fear that pulsed inside her like a ticking clock she couldn't stop. The man sitting next to her wasn't just any stranger anymore, Sundar Pichai. Even though she still didn't fully understand who he was, the way people looked at him, the way they spoke in hushed voices when he gave instructions, it told her he was someone important. Someone who could actually change things. And right now, that was her only hope. What did they say? Emily asked softly, her voice trembling. Sundar turned to her, his expression calm but firm. "Someone at the hospital called one of our Team members, there was a mistake in your dad's records. A clerical error. They marked him as no next of kin, which means they might have stopped necessary care, thinking there's no family to authorize it. Emily's heart dropped into her stomach. But I'm his family. I know, Sundar said. And we're going to fix it, I promise. His hand rested gently on hers for a moment, and though it was just a small gesture, it felt like an anchor in the storm raging inside her. As they neared the hospital, Sundar spoke into a small earpiece, coordinating with someone on the other end. Make sure the head administrator meets us at the front. We need the chief of surgery on call, prepare payment authorization, and notify patient advocacy. Now, Emily didn't understand all the words, but she felt the urgency. This wasn't just kindness anymore. This was action, power in motion. The car came to a sudden halt in front of the hospital. The automatic glass doors slid open as a nurse and a man in a suit rushed out to greet them. Mr. Pichai, the administrator said, flustered. We had no idea. We don't have time for that. Sundar cut him off, his voice sharp but not unkind. Where is David Green? Intensive care unit, floor 3, but let's go. Emily didn't wait for permission. She ran ahead, her small legs pounding against the tiled floor, her lungs burning. Every hallway felt longer than the last. Every beep from a monitor felt like a threat. Finally, she burst into the IQ, her eyes scanning the room, and there he was. Her father lay still. Tubes snaking from his arms, a machine breathing for him. His skin looked pale, thinner than before. But his chest rose, and so he was alive. Daddy. She cried, rushing to his side. A nurse tried to stop her, but Sundar raised a hand. Let her. Emily grabbed her father's hand and squeezed it tightly. I'm here, Daddy. I'm here. Please don't go. Please don't leave me. Behind her, doctors began crowding into the room. The surgeon glanced at the charts, his brow furrowing. His vitals are unstable. We were waiting for consent, and we hadn't received payment authorization. You have both now, Sundar said, pulling a document from his assistant's briefcase. Full coverage. Immediate consent from the legal guardian, his daughter. Proceed. The room shifted into motion. Nurses began prepping the equipment. The lights dimmed to surgery-ready mode, and the surgeon gave a firm nod. We'll do everything we can. They wheeled David away quickly, and Emily stood frozen. Her arms wrapped around herself, trying to stay strong. I can't lose him, she whispered. He's all I have. Sundar knelt beside her again, his voice softer now. He's a fighter, just like you. And you've done more than most adults would ever do. She looked up at him, tears clinging to her lashes. Why are you helping me? You don't even know us. He looked into her eyes, and for a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, finally he said, because once someone helped me. When I was very young, my father lost everything in a workplace accident. We couldn't afford his treatment. I felt powerless. Then a stranger stepped in. No spotlight, no announcement. They just helped. It changed my entire life. He paused, then added, and because the world doesn't change with grand gestures, it changes when we stop walking past people like you. Emily didn't fully understand the weight of his words, but she felt the truth in them, the warmth. The sincerity. They sat together in the waiting room as the hours dragged on. Sundar had food brought in, but Emily could only pick at it. Nurses passed by with updates. He's stable, vitals improving. Surgery underway. Each time her hope grew, but so did her fear. As the night deepened, a woman approached them. She was in her early 30s, wearing a navy blazer and a badge clipped to her pocket. Mr. Pichai, may I speak with you privately? Sundar nodded and turned to Emily. I will be right back, okay? Emily curled into the chair, exhaustion tugging at her. Her eyes fluttered closed. Meanwhile, the woman led Sundar down the hall. I am with Child Protective Services, she said. We received an anonymous tip. A report claiming a minor has been left unattended at a hospital for multiple days. We were told her father is in critical condition and she's been caring for herself. Sundar's expression shifted. Calm, but ice-cold underneath. Anonymous tip? Yes. Protocol requires us to investigate. Technically, she may be considered at risk. If there's no other family, she has family. Sundar interrupted. I'm standing right here. Are you her legal guardian? Not yet, he said. But I will be, if necessary. The woman hesitated. We're not trying to cause trouble. But in cases like these, we often have to involve foster care, at least temporarily. Sundar straightened. You are not taking that girl anywhere. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever unless she wants to leave. I understand your concern, Mr. Pichai, but this is a legal matter. Then you'll speak to my legal team, he said, pulling out his phone, and you'll do it outside, right now. She stood her ground for a moment, then nodded slowly. We'll be in touch. As she walked away, Sundar's fingers tightened around the phone. He had seen power used the wrong way many times. But tonight he would use his to protect something that truly mattered. When he returned, Emily was asleep, curled up like a kitten, one hand still clutching the crumpled napkin. Sundar sat beside her quietly, watching her chest rise and fall. And for the first time in years, he felt something inside him shift. Not as a CEO, not as a public figure, but as a man who had almost forgotten what it meant to sit still, to hold space for someone else's pain, to fight for someone else's hope. The hours dragged on until finally, just past midnight, the surgeon appeared at the door. His face unreadable. Sundar stood up. How is he? The surgeon took a breath. The surgery was long, complicated, but he made it. He's alive. Emily stirred, waking just in time to hear those words. He's alive? She whispered. The surgeon nodded. He's not out of the woods yet. But he's strong, and now he has a real chance. Emily jumped up and ran into Sundar's arms without thinking. She didn't even ask for permission. She just hugged him with all the love and relief a child could hold in her tiny heart. He hugged her back. Eyes damped out for a moment. The world was still. But peace would not last long. The next morning, news vans began arriving outside the hospital, not because of David's surgery, but because someone had leaked the story of the tech billionaire who found a little girl selling lemonade to save her dad. Cameras rolled. Headlines buzzed. Billionaire's secret act of kindness. Girl's lemonade dream comes true thanks to Google CEO. But Emily hadn't asked for any of it. She just wanted her dad to wake up. She just wanted life to go back to normal. And then came the reporter, the one who asked the question that would change everything. Double quotes, Mr. Pichai. The woman shouted, shoving a mic forward. Is it true you've promised to adopt this girl? Emily's eyes widened in shock. What? She whispered. And Sundar turned slowly to face her. His answer would shake the world. Asterisk headlines. Heartbreak. And hard truth's words echoed louder in Emily's ears than the hum of the hospital monitors or the crowd of reporters gathering at the entrance. Is it true you've promised to adopt this girl? The question struck her like lightning, sudden, sharp, and confusing. She hadn't expected it, hadn't thought about it, hadn't even imagined a world where someone else might become her parent, especially someone like Sundar. For a moment, Sundar didn't speak. The camera lights bore down on him. Microphones hovered too close. Every breath he took felt like it would be captured and analyzed by a million strangers online. And in middle of it all, Emily stood beside him, blinking up at him with eyes full of uncertainty. He turned slightly, looked directly into her face. His expression was gentle, unreadable, but focused. Then he faced the crowd, his voice calm but deliberate. I'm not here to make this about me. Emily is a brave, remarkable young girl. And right now, all that matters is her father's recovery. Everything else is noise. The reporters fired more questions, desperate for something, anything that would make their headlines sing. But Sundar raised a hand, signaling enough. His team quickly moved into position, forming a soft barrier between him and the press. But the damage had already been done. The question was out there. And it wasn't. Going away. Inside the hospital lobby, Emily sat on a cold bench, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her oversized hoodie. She didn't know how to feel. Just 2 days ago, she'd been invisible, another child with a sick parent and no hope. Now the world seemed to be watching her every move. Strangers on the internet were sharing her story. People were calling her brave, strong, even inspirational. But no one really knew her. No one knew how scared she still was. No one knew she cried herself to sleep. When no one was looking, she stared down at her hands. Small, tired, still sticky from squeezing. Lemons the day before. Would she still be selling lemonade tomorrow? Or would everything be different now? Sundar sat beside her, holding 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. He handed one to her, and she accepted it silently. They were loud, she said after a long moment, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, he replied. They said, you wanted to adopt me. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink, then placed it down on the bench beside him. What they said isn't the whole story, he began gently. I want you to understand something. Emily, helping someone doesn't always mean taking over their life. You have a father, and right now, our goal is to get him back on his feet. I'm not here to replace him. I'm here to stand beside you both. For as long as you need. Her eyes glistened and her voice cracked when she said, but what if he doesn't wake up? Sundar looked at her with an ache in his chest. He had spent his life solving problems, fixing broken systems, pushing limits, leading. Innovation. But this was different. This was raw, human pain. And there was no algorithm to erase it. He placed a hand over hers. If that happens, and only if that happens, we'll talk about what comes next. And whatever we decide, we'll decide it together. I promise you that. Emily nodded slowly. The reassurance helped, but the worry didn't vanish. It just went quiet for a while. Meanwhile, David lay in recovery, unconscious, but stable. The surgery had saved his life, but his body was weak. The doctors said it would take time. Lots of it. And patience. And luck. Emily visited his room every morning and every night, reading to him from one of his favorite books, Charlotte's Web. Her voice was small, but steady. She hoped maybe, just maybe, he could hear her. Maybe his heart would recognize her the way hers recognized his. And in the background, the world continued to buzz. News stories evolved from whispers to waves. Sundar's secret act of kindness became a viral headline. Thousands of people began donating to a fund one of the nurses had quietly started online to help cover David's future care. Strangers left messages for Emily. Some shared their own stories. Others just wanted to say they were proud of her. Her lemonade stand photo, taken by a passing pedestrian days earlier, became the image of hope on social media feeds. But with visibility came shadows. One morning, a man appeared in the hospital lobby wearing a cheap suit and holding a stack of documents. He claimed to be David's distant cousin, no one Emily had ever seen. He told the staff that he had come to take Emily to a better place. He said it was for the best. Said she didn't belong in the chaos of cameras and tech. Billionaires. But Sundar's team stepped in. Fast. They discovered the man had a long record of fraud. He'd filed similar claims before with other vulnerable families. He was escorted out within minutes. When Emily heard about it, she sat silently on her hospital room bed, hugging her knees. Why would someone do that? She asked. Because not everyone in the world is kind, Sundar said, honestly. Some people see pain and try to profit from it. But you're not alone anymore. We're watching out for you, always. Emily looked up at him. Promise? He nodded. Promise. Days passed and routines formed. Sundar rearranged his schedule to stay close. He often worked from the hospital lounge, taking calls and meetings through his laptop. Emily would sit near him, doing puzzles, reading books, or sometimes just drawing pictures on the paper napkins from the cafeteria. She liked being near him. It made the quiet less scary. One evening, just after sunset, Sundar got a phone call. The voice on the other end was serious, almost frantic. You need to come downstairs now. He didn't ask questions. He stood, took Emily by the hand, and walked with her to the main entrance. And what they saw stopped them. Both thought the sidewalk outside the hospital was lined with dozens of people. Strangers, holding candles, holding signs. "We love you, Emily. You're not alone. Thank you, Sundar." It wasn't a protest. It was a vigil, quiet, respectful, emotional dot, and at the front stood the little boy about Emily's age. He held out a mason jar filled with coins. "I sold cookies," he said shyly, "for your dad." Emily took the jar in her hands. Tears spilled from her eyes. Sundar crouched down beside her. This is what kindness becomes. It spreads. That night, Emily asked to sleep in the chair next to her father again. And just before she drifted off, she whispered, "Daddy, I hope you can hear me. The world is changing, but I still just want you back." The next morning, everything changed again. Emily had just returned from brushing her teeth. When she stepped into the room and froze, her father's eyes were open, barely. But open, she dropped her toothbrush, ran to his bedside, and cried out, "Daddy." His lips moved slowly, painfully, but she heard it. The word that made her heart leap. Sunshine. Her nickname. She grabbed his hand and cried uncontrollably, calling out for the nurses. Within moments, the room was full of medical staff checking vitals, verifying his status. The doctor turned to her with a stunned smile. "He's conscious. This is a good sign." Sundar arrived seconds later, having been called from his makeshift office upstairs. When he walked in and saw David blinking slowly, he exhaled deeply, quietly. "Hello, David," he said gently. David looked at him. "Confused, weak, but aware? You are," he managed to say, "just someone who believed in your daughter?" Emily stayed by her dad's side the whole day. She refused to let go of his hand. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel scared when night came. She felt hope. But just when everything seemed to finally be heading toward peace, a call came in from the hospital administrator. Sundar was asked to meet in the boardroom immediately. Inside, he was met by the hospital's director, a lawyer, and two security officers. "We have a situation," the director said. "Someone hacked into our servers and leaked confidential patient records. David's file was among them." Sundar's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean leaked?" "His medical history, billing details, and a document that wasn't supposed to exist." "What document?" "A power of attorney form, signed by David weeks ago, naming someone else as legal guardian of Emily, not her." Sundar's blood ran cold. "Who?" "Someone from his past. A name we haven't seen before, but the signature looks real." He stood silently, trying to process the implications. Someone was trying to take her away again. But this time, it wasn't a scam artist. This time, it was legal dot and the name on the document. Was about to open a door to a secret no one expected. A secret that could destroy everything they had fought for. Asterisk. Secrets behind signature. Sundar stared at the documents spread across the long wooden table. Fluorescent lights above hummed quietly. But the silence in the room was deafening. The paper before him wasn't just ink and names, it was a threat. A carefully timed strike from the shadows, and he didn't like surprises. Especially not when they involved Emily. The hospital administrator slid the form closer. "We double-checked. The document appears valid. It was signed nearly 5 weeks ago and notarized." "That can't be," Sundar muttered, his voice low and sharp. 5 weeks ago, David was already hospitalized, barely coherent. He wouldn't have known what he was signing. The lawyer across the table leaned forward. "That's precisely the issue. Pichai, if he was medically incapacitated, then the signature could be challenged. But if we can't prove that definitively, the form holds legal weight." Sundar's fingers tapped slowly against the table, his mind racing. "And the person named, who are they?" The administrator cleared her throat. "The name is Evelyn Kane." The name felt cold in the air, unfamiliar, disconnected, like a puzzle piece from the wrong box. "And who is Evelyn Kane?" "Sundar." "Ask Dot." The lawyer clicked his pen. "We don't know much yet." But according to the form, she claims to be Emily's aunt. She lists a residential address in Detroit, Michigan. She also filed for legal guardianship 2 days ago. It's already in court. Sundar stood abruptly. That can't happen, not without David's consent. And certainly not against Emily's will. Mr. Pichai, the lawyer said cautiously, we understand your concern, but until we have more information, we can't stop the court proceedings. They've been expedited. The hearing is scheduled in 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. Sundar exhaled slowly, forcing calm over his rising frustration. Then we find out who she really is, and we find out now. As he left the room, his assistant rushed to keep up, tablet in hand, already pulling records, addresses, and background reports. Sundar moved like a man on a mission, controlled, but relentless. Emily wasn't just a cause to him anymore. She was family, and no one stole family under his watchdog. Meanwhile, Emily sat in her father's hospital room, drawing quietly beside his bed. David was awake now, still groggy, his speech slow and halting, but he could recognize her. He could squeeze her hand, and most importantly, he could smile. It was weak, but it was real. Sunshine, he whispered. You stayed. She leaned in, her small hand brushing back his hair. I'll always stay. His eyes moistened. I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you. You did, she said softly. You always did, and now you're back. That's all I wanted. The moment was fragile, like glass held gently in trembling hands. But it was real, and Emily felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Safe. Until she overheard the nurse leaking just outside the door. Legal hearing. Guardianship. Custody battle. She froze. Her fingers clenched around the edge of her drawing paper. And the question that had haunted her before returned stronger than ever. Was someone going to take her away? When Sundar returned later that evening, she didn't greet him with her usual quiet smile. Instead, she met him at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes guarded. What's going on? She asked. He crouched to her level. I was going to talk to you about it soon. You said I was safe. You are, he assured her. But something's come up. A woman filed legal papers, claiming to be your aunt. My aunt? Emily's. Brow furrowed. But I don't have one, my dad said. There was no family left. That's what I thought too. But we're looking into it. Is she going to take me? Her voice cracked. Not if I have anything to do with it, Sundar said firmly. And not if your dad doesn't want her to. Emily looked back at her father, now resting again, the machines beeping steadily beside him. Then she turned back to Sundar. Then I want to fight, he smiled gently. You already are. Asterisk that night, Sundar's team worked through every legal loophole, every data record, every archive family detail they could find. What emerged was a tangled web. Evelyn Kane was indeed a relative, technically, David's estranged stepsister. They hadn't spoken in over 15 years. Court records revealed a messy history, custody battles, financial fraud, even a stint in county jail for forging signatures on property documents. Her connection to Emily was legal on paper, but toxic in reality. And worst of all, it appeared Evelyn had been tipped off about David's condition weeks ago by a former nurse who had since been fired. Evelyn swooped in, presented herself as the only surviving relative, and manipulated David during his most vulnerable state into signing a legal document he barely understood. Sundar stood at the window of his hotel suite, looking out over the city lights, his mind burning with fury. This is exploitation, he said aloud. She's using Emily to gain control of any donations or inheritance David might leave behind. It's about money. His legal counsel nodded solemnly. It's not uncommon. Vulnerable families, especially when media attention is involved, become targets. But we can challenge the power of attorney, especially if we get David to testify. Sundar's jaw clenched. Then we prepare. Because in 48 hours, we're not just walking into court. He turned back toward his desk. We're walking. Into war? Asterisk the next morning. Emily visited her father with a folder of drawings and questions. Questions about Evelyn. About the past. about the signature. David, though still weak, told her everything. She was trouble, he said slowly. Always wanted control, lies, manipulation. I cut ties. Years ago. Didn't want her near you. Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. She came back. Said you gave her permission to take me? No, he rasped. Never. Never would. She squeezed his hand tightly. I believe you. And Sundar's helping. He nodded weakly. Trust. Him. He's good. Meanwhile, Sundar called a press conference outside the hospital. Not to spin the story. Not to seek more fame. But to make a statement. A clear one. He stood before the cameras, Emily at his side, and said, "This is not about headlines. This is about humanity." A young girl selling lemonade to save her. Father's life has now been thrust into a legal storm by someone who hasn't been part of her life for over a decade. Someone who sees her as an opportunity, not as a child in need of care. I stand with Emily. And I will continue to protect her no matter what courtrooms we must walk into. The words lit up the internet like wildfire. People rallied behind Emily once again. Donations spiked. Celebrities began tweeting. Even former patients of Evelyn Kane came forward, describing their own experiences with her manipulation. But it would all come down to one place. Family court. The next day. Sundar. And Emily walked into a beige government building with worn carpet and flickering overhead lights. Everything about it felt cold, impersonal, yet inside that courtroom, everything was about to get deeply personal. Emily wore a simple dress and held Sundar's hand tightly. She looked small beside him, but her eyes were fierce. Evelyn Kane arrived. Shortly after, flanked by her own lawyer, wearing a tailored navy suit and forced smile. Hello, sunshine, she said sweetly. You've grown so much. Emily said nothing. Sundar gently stepped in front of her. The judge entered. Stern. No nonsense. The kind of man who had seen too much and trusted too little. He looked over the paperwork. Listened to both sides. Evelyn's lawyer argued that she was the only blood relative listed in any official capacity. That she had proof of power of attorney. That she was ready and willing to care for Emily and manage David's medical affairs. Sundar's. Legal team pushed back hard, presenting evidence of Evelyn's past fraud, her sudden appearance after media exposure, and the vulnerability of David during the time of signing. Then came the moment that would decide everything. The judge turned to the bailiff, bring in the witness. A hospital staff wheeled in David Green, frail but alert. Emily gasped softly at the sight of him upright, his head held high despite the pain. He looked directly at Evelyn. You tricked me, he said, his voice weak, but clear. I didn't understand what I was signing. I thought you were helping. You just wanted money. The courtroom was silent. My daughter stays with me, or with someone I trust, someone who was there when no one else was. He looked at Emily. Then at Sundar. The judge took a deep breath, reviewed the papers, then looked up. I'll issue my decision tomorrow morning, he said. Court is adjourned. As Emily and Sundar walked out of the courtroom, the hallway felt too quiet, too long, too uncertain. What if he says no? Emily whispered. Sundar didn't answer right away. Then he looked down at her. Then we fight again. The decision and the deal morning broke with a strange hush over the city. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, but heavy. Like the whole world was holding its breath. In the courthouse, sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting pale golden lines across the cold tiled floor. Outside, a modest group of supporters had gathered with handmade signs and quiet prayers, holding photos of Emily, candles, and old teddy bears they hoped would remind the judge that this was about a child, not a legal loophole or a name on. Paper. Inside, Emily sat beside Sundar in the courtroom, her legs dangling from the wooden bench. She was dressed in a simple yellow dress, David's favorite color. Her father had insisted she wear it that morning, whispering, "Bright colors bring bright days." He was too weak to come this time, still recovering at the hospital, but he had asked her to be brave. You've already done the impossible. Sunshine, he had said. This is just one more sunrise to walk through. Sundar sat upright, a calmness about him that didn't come from certainty, but from determination. He had seen the system bend for power, for money, for influence. But today, he hoped it would bend for something else. For truth. Across the room, Evelyn Kane sat with her lawyer, her arms crossed, face expressionless. She wore a polished gray suit and subtle makeup, but her eyes flicked around the room nervously. She wasn't prepared for the attention this case had drawn, not just from the media, but from people, real people watching every move, measuring every lie, every truth. Her story was unraveling. And she knew it. The judge entered, his black robe brushing against the floor like a wave. He settled into his seat, placed a pair of thin-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose, and opened a folder labeled Custody Case. Emily Green. "Good morning," he said simply. "After reviewing all evidence, testimonies, and documentation, this court has come to a decision." Emily held Sundar's hand tighter. He gave her a small squeeze, never looking away from the judge. The claim brought forth by Miss Evelyn Kane is supported by a signed power of attorney and family connection. However, he paused. The credibility of said document has been sufficiently challenged. Based on medical timelines, witness statements, and the testimony of Mr. David Green himself, it is clear the document was signed under compromised circumstances. Evelyn shifted in her seat. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court cannot ignore Miss Kane's prior history involving exploitation, identity fraud, and financial manipulation. While everyone deserves a chance at redemption, this court's duty is to prioritize the safety, stability, and emotional well-being of the child. He looked directly at Emily. Her eyes widened, unblinking. Therefore, legal guardianship of Emily Green will remain with her biological father, David Green. In the event of his passing or inability to fulfill his role, the court will review future custody based on David's written wishes. A murmur rippled through the room. Sundar exhaled slowly. This case is closed, the judge said. Evelyn stood abruptly. This isn't over, she hissed under her breath. Her lawyer tried to calm her, but it was too late. Her mask had cracked. Security escorted her out before she could do more damage. Emily turned toward Sundar, tears flooding her cheeks, but this time, not from fear. She didn't speak. She simply leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him, her tiny frame pressed against his chest. He knelt to return the embrace, holding her like someone who understood exactly how much had just been lifted off her small shoulders. The reporters outside were waiting. But this time, Sundar didn't speak. He didn't need to. He lifted Emily into the car, whispered, "Let's go see your dad," and left the rest of the world to buzz behind them. Asterisk, asterisk at the hospital. David's eyes welled up when he saw them walk in. "You're safe," he whispered. As Emily ran to his side, "You kept your promise, Daddy," she said, her voice trembling. "You came back." They stayed in that room for hours talking, laughing softly, crying freely. Sundar stepped out at one point to give them privacy, standing in the hallway staring at the vending machine, lost in thought. It should have been the end of the story. Victory, justice, but something inside him still felt unfinished. He had seen something in Evelyn's face before she left. Something more than anger. It was fear. Fear of something deeper. And he'd learned long ago, people didn't just act out of greed. Sometimes they acted out of desperation. And he needed to know why. Back in his suite that evening, he called his private investigator. "Dig deeper," he said. "I want to know everything about Evelyn. Not just her past, but who she owes. Who's behind her recent moves." Within hours, a file landed on his desk. And what he read shook him. Evelyn was deep in debt. Not just to banks, but to private collectors, dangerous ones. She had borrowed large sums from an underground loan network tied to illegal medical experiments and hush money settlements. Her move on Emily hadn't been just about inheritance. It had been her only way out. She'd been offered 6 figures to gain custody, signed over guardianship rights to a private institute, and disappeared. Another. Words, she had been a pawn. And Emily had been the price. Sundar's fist clenched. Someone had tried to buy a child's life, and it wasn't over. Asterisk asterisk the next day. Sundar met with David in private. Asterisk. There's something I haven't told Emily, Sundar said quietly, laying the report on the tray table beside the hospital bed. Evelyn was working for someone dangerous. David scanned the pages, his face hardening. What do they want with my daughter? He whispered. I don't know yet, but I intend to find out, and I'm going to protect her. Even if it means more than just donations and legal defense. David looked up at him. Why are you doing all this? Sundar hesitated, then spoke slowly. Because when I was 8 years old, someone tried to take my sister away. They told my mother she was too poor, too unstable to care for us. A social worker came with papers, and if it weren't for a teacher who stood up and said no, she would have been gone. He paused, the memory still raw. I know what it's like to feel powerless. And I promised myself if I ever had power, I'd use it for people who didn't. David's voice cracked. Then you already are family. Asterisk. The following week, Emily returned to her lemonade stand. Not because she needed to anymore, but because she wanted to dot a new sign hung a table. Thank you for helping me save my dad. Now we help others. She poured lemonade for free, accepted donations for other families in the hospital, told her story to those who asked, and smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. She smiled that. One afternoon, a sleek car pulled up beside her stand. Sundar stepped out, holding a small box. What's that? Emily asked, curious. He opened it to reveal a pin shaped like a lemon delicate, gold-plated, with tiny engraved letters. Lemonade Leaders Foundation. Founder, Emily Green. She stared at it in awe. What is this? We're starting a foundation, Sundar explained, to help other kids like you. Kids who fight for their families. Kids who sell lemonade or do chores or sleep in hospital chairs for weeks. And you're the founder? The first. Emily was speechless. You. Me? You. Sundar nodded. You showed the world what courage looks like. And now you get to pass that light on. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from the quiet, overwhelming power of being seen, being valued, being believed in. She hugged him again, tighter than ever before. And somewhere, just down the road, another child stood behind another stand, watching. Hope was spreading. But just as the sun began to set on a perfect day, Sundar's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Encrypted message. He opened it. It read, you think this is over? We were promised that girl. You just bought yourself into something bigger than you can handle. He stared at the message, heart slowing, then picked up the phone and made one call. Activate full protocol. And trace the sender. He looked over at Emily laughing, pouring lemonade for a smiling couple. And he whispered to himself, not on my watch. Asterisk, the girl who changed the world. The sun dipped behind the trees as the sky melted into shades of orange and lavender, casting a soft golden glow over the little sidewalk stand. It should have been a peaceful evening. Lemonade in plastic cups, children giggling nearby, parents smiling at the young girl who had, in just a few weeks, become the face of courage. But even in that beauty, a quiet storm was beginning to build in the distance. Sundar stood across the street, phone still in his hand. The encrypted message burned into his mind. We were promised that girl. His grip tightened. There was something sinister behind those words, something cold, calculated, and dangerous. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control, about power, about taking the purest thing they could find, Emily, and twisting it. For profit, he turned toward the security decal station nearby. Lock it down. No one comes near her unless they go through you first. Yes, sir, the lead agent responded, already signaling his team to close the perimeter. But even as his team worked, Sundar felt the weight of something darker pressing in. This threat was different, quieter. It moved through shadows, not headlines. Whoever sent that message wasn't just angry, they were organized. Asterisk back in the hospital, David's recovery was slow but steady. The nurses called him The miracle. Man, every day he asked for updates about Emily, the foundation, the lemonade stand. And every day he smiled when Sundar visited, no longer just a powerful stranger, but a trusted friend. You gave her her future, David whispered one morning. His voice still rough from surgery. Sundar shook his head gently. No, she carved her future with her own hands. All I did was make sure no one stole it from her. But even as he said it, the message from the day before haunted him. The world didn't always let light shine without trying to snuff it out. Asterisk, asterisk, the foundation launched. Officially a week later, hundreds gathered in the small park near Emily's neighborhood. There was a stage, a few balloons, and a long table filled with pictures of lemonade. But the real spotlight was Emily dressed in her signature yellow. She stepped onto the stage, with a microphone too big for her hands and a smile too wide for her face. I don't know everything about the world, she said softly, but I know what it feels like to be scared. And I know what it feels like when someone says, I believe in you. So that's what this foundation is about, telling kids they matter. Telling them they're not alone. And reminding them that even a lemonade stand can save a life. The crowd erupted in applause. Sundar stood in the front row, eyes damp, filled with a kind of pride he hadn't felt in years. But he was also watching. Because he knew this wasn't just a celebration. It was a warning to whoever had tried to take her. She wasn't just a little girl anymore. She was a symbol, asterisk, asterisk, that night, as Emily slept soundly in her room. Sundar met with his cybersecurity team in a quiet office. They had traced the source of the threatening message. Not a single person, but an organization. A shell company based overseas. No employees listed. No activity. Except one major transaction. Recorded just days before Evelyn Kane attempted to file for custody. A payment for services related to acquisition. The name on the payment? Morrogate Biosolutions. A pharmaceutical research group with a hidden arm one that funded clinical trials involving genetic profiling in children, unregulated, illegal. And now exposed, they have been targeting vulnerable families, offering money in exchange for custody of children deemed medically interesting. And Emily's father, David, carried a rare genetic marker, a mutation linked to exceptional cognitive resilience, a trait the company believed was inherited, and Emily, she was their next subject. Rage surged through Sundar like a fire. They hadn't just wanted to control Emily, they wanted to use her. Experiment on her. Erase her humanity for the sake of a lab report. Asterisk, asterisk, the next morning, Sundar made a decision. He flew to Washington, D.C. within 24 hours. He was sitting across from federal agents, holding a thick folder filled with documents, bank statements, medical notes, and encrypted emails. I'm not here as a CEO, he said calmly. I'm here as a citizen, and I want to take them down. The agents were stunned. They had heard whispers of Morrogate before, but no one had ever connected the dots until now. Sundar handed over every file, every link, every name. If anything happens to her, he said, you'll know exactly who's behind it. And then he walked out, not with fear, but with purpose. Asterisk, asterisk, back in the hospital. David received a letter from the court, one he hadn't expected. He had filed a simple document, naming Sundar as Emily's legal guardian in the event anything ever happened to him, not out of fear, but out of peace. Because he knew, without a doubt, that no one in the world would protect her more fiercely. When Sundar visited that evening, David handed him the paper. I'm getting stronger. He sighed. But the world is unpredictable, and if I ever can't be there, I want her with you. Sundar looked at the letter for a long time. Then he folded it carefully. She'll always have me, he whispered. Asterisk, asterisk, weeks passed. The foundation grew. Emily went back to school where her teachers treated her not as a celebrity, but as a girl who had lived through something big and come out stronger. She made new friends. She laughed again. She started a kindness club where students shared stories of helping others. And every weekend she returned to her lemonade stand not to raise money, but to remind herself where it all began. But one evening, as she was closing the stand, a man in a plain black jacket approached. "You're Emily, right?" "Yes, Dot." She nodded slowly. He smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you. My little brother, he saw your story, and it gave him the courage to speak up about something bad that was happening at home. Now he's safe, and I think that's because of you." Emily blinked, stunned. "You're not just helping your dad," he said. "You're helping all of us." She watched him walk away, heart pounding. Dot, and for the first time, she realized her story was no longer just her own. Asterisk, asterisk, months later, Sundar stood on a stage at an international conference. He wasn't there to talk about technology. Dot, he was there to talk about kindness. Dot, he told the story of a little girl with braids and a lemonade stand. He told the story of her father who fought from a hospital bed. Dot, and he told the world how a child's love could change not just one life, but many. Dot, when he ended his speech, he looked into the crowd and said, "We chase so many things, success, money, recognition, but the only legacy that truly matters is how we treat people when no one is watching, how we show up when it's not convenient, and how we listen." When a little girl says, "Please help me save my dad," the crowd rose in a standing ovation, and somewhere backstage, Emily waited to join him on stage, holding a pitcher of lemonade and a smile that could light up the darkest night. And as they walked out together, hand in hand, cameras flashing, hearts swelling, the world remembered something it had almost forgotten, that miracles don't always come from big moments. Sometimes they come from a small girl